And we are live, guys. Welcome, women of high value. Today, my name is Joseph Darling. I want to share with you my thoughts on why motherhood. Because I respect women so much, I respect motherhood so much. I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and my mother was a mother. Okay, she did her utmost best for her kids to be taken care of, for her kids to have whatever they needed, and for her kids to feel loved. And she did that. And it was very hard at times. Rearing 8 kids is not easy. And but still she did her very best, and she truly has joy today because of her kids. All of her kids love her, and she feels that love. She did say the other day, though, and I quote, "If I had known how fun it is to have grandkids, I would have had those first." So that was a bit funny quote for my mother. And so there you have it. I'm just kind of explaining where I come from, the background, so that you understand where those thoughts of motherhood comes from. Because she was an amazing mother to me, basically set me up for success and prepared me for life. And her explaining that, she has so much joy in her grandkids. That's food for thought. I also heard another video the other day from Kim Kiyosaki. Now, she's the wife of one of one that has been my biggest mentor in the past 12 years, whom I've read most of his books, and I completely focus on him because he's talking about being financially literate or financial literacy, and how men should just build businesses and be capitalists and focus on producing better products and services for people that you eventually get paid for, and that allows you to make better products and services, which increases the comfortability of people in general and brings people out of poverty. Now, his wife is different. They chose, on this show, she was explaining how they chose to not have kids at all. And I remember sometimes Robert Kiyosaki would talk about, on his seminars, he would talk about how, the difference between a house and liability, and how your house is actually a liability and not an asset. And then asking the people on the show, well, what about kids? Are they an asset or are they a liability? And then people would laugh, but in some ways, in the back of his mind, I guess he was serious, because they eventually chose to not have kids at all. Now, what is interesting now is that Kim Kiyosaki, his wife, was talking about on this show how women need to become more successful. Women need to become entrepreneurs. And she obviously gives them the choice. She's like, women should be allowed to choose what they want to do. Now, I agree with that. But at what expense? What if they do choose to be focused on their careers and not focus on the family? What happens when you choose to focus on climbing the career ladder and not focused on being a mother? You're sacrificing some things, and some women are saying, well, I want to have it all. That's very tricky. In this equation, you got to remember that you have a spouse, hopefully, and that spouse will always be your opposite. The more ambitious a woman is, the less ambitious her husband will be, very often. Now, that has not been the case in terms of Robert Kiyosaki and Kim, because they've both been ambitious. But in my opinion, it was at the sacrifice of their kids, which they ended up never having. So, did they miss out on their kids? Did they miss out on the joy and the happiness that comes from having children? I think so. Now, they, of course, should be allowed to live their life and choose themselves. I'm just saying it's it's heartbreaking for me to see that she encourages women to sometimes basically to follow in her footsteps and say that you should choose. Maybe motherhood is not for you. Maybe business is something more interesting. And telling, like, for example, she said that when girls, grow up and play in the yard, you see them playing house. And the boys are playing, with army and guns and stuff. And then she's like, well, maybe the girls should be allowed to play army and the boys should be also allowed to play house. And I disagree. Because there are certain traits that we are grown up with. They're like, men are supposed to protect and provide. That's the gene that we've been given. Men, if they're not allowed to do those two things, they crumble out of lack of motivation. They end up coming to the point where they don't want to do anything because there's no need for them to do anything. We're basically allowing boys these days to just play on their computers all the time throughout their teenage years. I gotta admit that my kids right now, they're being homeschooled, so they do spend some time on, in front of their screens, but a lot of that time is spent learning and growing. But once my sons get to a certain level, I will bring them into my business and teach them the ropes of business so that they can provide and protect. And my daughter, because I have 2 sons and I have 1 daughter. My daughter, I will make sure that my wife teaches her how to focus on her emotions, how to focus on joy, how to focus on being in the now, being in the present, how to avoid rejection, avoid doing things that could impede your emotions and put you more in your head than where you're supposed to be. Now, this is what I've realized in terms of women. Very often, they want to feel. If women don't feel, very often they feel dead inside. It's the worst non-feeling in the world. A non-feeling is the worst feeling in the world for women. Men, they can operate without emotion. We can operate without feelings, and it's not a big deal for us. We can keep on doing whatever we're doing as long as we enjoy the work that we're doing. We can be consistent. It can be boring as long as we know what we're going to get in the end, which is the emotion that we're looking for. But we can be bored all the time and just simply be fired up about the future, no matter what's happening in our current circumstance. Women are not quite the same way. Like, it's very difficult for women to really, truly enjoy the journey and think about the long-term future and be fired up and excited about doing boring, menial, consistently work. Because it puts women in their heads. And it doesn't allow them to feel the joy of being alive, feel the joy of doing something like that they're fired up about. Because of their reproductive cycles. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, I have to admit, in that show, Kim Kiyosaki was also mentioning how women are, these days, calling in less sick. I don't know where she got those stats, but that might be true. And men work fewer hours than women as well. Again, interesting stats, but are they positive stats? Would you want a society where you're expected to do massive amounts of work because guys don't care? Guys are not interested in providing and protecting you because they're not getting any benefit or reward for it? Wouldn't you want men to fight and struggle and slay the dragon for you? Or you want to slay the dragon yourself, and then the man is like, all right, see you later. And he's like going off in his own direction, doing his own thing. That's what's happening to society these days. And the more women are focused on careers and at the expense of motherhood and in my opinion, true fulfillment and joy and happiness, the more men are going their own way and basically going to use women for their own short-term benefit and going to leave them alone to do their own thing, the future societies can't work with that. And society, that's how societies eventually collapse. Women are massively powerful and very often better than men. But what ends up making civilization collapse is not the fact that women become powerful, is that they became powerful at the expense of the next generation. The next generation is what we're trying to do this for. We're trying to create a more beautiful, more amazing next generation. That's very difficult. When women focus their efforts outside of the home instead of inside the home, where it's the most important, the most rewarding, the most fun, but also the hardest. Unfortunately, very often, what gives you the most joy in life is sometimes the thing that breaks your heart the most, where there's most pain. To be rejected by your own kids is way harder than being rejected out there in the marketplace. Ask any mother. You want to make sure that your children don't reject you, that they love you. And in my example, going back to my mother, for the majority, like pretty much until I was a teenager, she was at home, a stay-at-home mother. That's what's changed everything for me and made everything possible to create the future that I wanted. It allowed me to learn, to grow, to become, because I knew my mother loved me. I knew that she would do anything for me. Can you be that mother for your kids? That's a choice that you make. But understand that time passes. Your kids are growing up. And if you don't spend time with them, you're simply giving them over to the government, who are taking 2/3 of the money that you make anyway. At least here in Norway. In America, it might be half, if you include taxes and all other things that the government require from you. Who are you working for? You're working for your kids. The career ladder is a trap. And you're basically ending up sacrificing your entire life and your children in the same equation of trying to make things happen in the marketplace. For you young girls, what I recommend is to work your entire youth on remaining feminine, on remaining in the bubble that your parents have created, preferably not going to school. I mean, learn how to, all the basics and do all the government regulated stuff that you have to do, throughout your school years. But don't spend your entire life, your entire youth, 8 hours at a school when you can do everything that needs to get done in 1 hour at home, and focus on your emotions and focus on your dreams. Think big. I want you to massively achieve, but do it through your husband instead of doing it through you. A husband that's motivated and massively rewarded for his efforts because of a feminine wife who loves him and adores him can do 10 times, 20 times, 50 times more than you ever could. Simply because motivated men can move mountains, not only in a short period of time, but for years and decades because of the love of a woman. because of his love for his children. For women, this is quite difficult to do because of the emotional up and down of everything that's happening in one's life. To create an empire for women is a lot easier to do once their husband has already created one. This is why Elena Cardone is able to write books and succeed in her own life because of her husband Grant. This is why Kim Kiyosaki can go out and tell women, oh, you should become entrepreneurs because you'll be amazing. Absolutely, you'll be amazing when you're mentored by your husband, who's already created an empire. But for a woman to start from scratch and want to start her business, you're doing it at the expense of your husband and at the expense of your kids. And you'll see divorce rates increasing. The more independent women are, the easier it is to let go and just move on with your life. And let's find another man who you're going to have the exact same issues with because you're you. And you attract the opposite of who you are. And it works for a little time. But the more feminine he is, the less power he has, the shorter that in love phase is going to last. The more you're into business and career, the more masculine you have to be. So what I suggest is that we create a society where we allow women to be mothers. We encourage women to be mothers. Because if they choose something else, it will be at the expense of the most important thing in life, which is joy and happiness in motherhood and in your children. This is the Women of High Value channel. My name is Joseph Darling. Hopefully you got some value out of this. And if you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And I'll see you again tomorrow.